So until now we have been studying basically free electron theories. One of that is a classical free electron theory. That means we treated the free electron, the electrons in a metal as a free electron gas. So it was a classical free electron gas. So it gave some things which are right, but basically because of a cancellation of the error. So once one discovered this cancellation, and one could see, for example, the specific heat was given as a very low, or rather very large specific heat was actually given for the free electron gas compared to a real metal. So free electron gas theory, which was classical free electron gas theory, was not correct. Then came the this was actually the Drude theory, Drude or Drude theory, whatever you want to call. Then we had this quantum free electron gas. So this corrected many of the errors that were there in the classical free electron gas. So we could get the specific heat was okay, and so also a few other properties. This we discussed in detail, a few other properties which we discussed in detail. But one of the big failures of the quantum free electron gas model or the free electron theory is that free electron model fails to distinguish between different materials as metals or insulators or semiconductors. So this was one of the biggest failures of the free electron model, because it can never tell you whether a material is a metal or whether a material is an insulator or a semiconductor. And of course you had a few other failures. For example, the high field Hall effect, measurement on aluminum showed that charge carriers have a positive charge carriers have a positive charge. So how can you have charge carriers which have a positive charge when you actually have electrons in the metal? So this was one of the things that was a big puzzle, and it could not be understood. Of course, in order to address these things, we have to go to a slightly better model, and the slightly better model is to recognize that that electrons are not free, but are moving in a periodic potential. Periodic potential. So that is to say that we have a potential V of R which is equal to V of R plus Rn, where Rn is a lattice translation vector given by Rn equal to N1 times A plus N2 times B plus N3 times C, where A, B, C are primitive translation vectors of the crystal, or primitive translation vectors of the crystal. So what we are interested now in finding out the energy levels of an electron moving in a periodic potential. That means to say that the Hamiltonian for the nearly free electron model, I call it NFE, is equal to a kinetic energy term, which is minus h cross squared by 2m del squared, plus V of r, where V of r has the periodicity of the lattice as I have shown there. Now, because of the periodicity of the lattice, we can think of constructing a reciprocal lattice like we had shown earlier. So, we can construct the primitive vectors of a reciprocal lattice. We can construct as was shown earlier, and they are given by A is equal to 2 pi times B cross C divided by A dot B cross C, and B is equal to 2 pi times C cross A divided by A dot B cross C, and C is equal to 2 pi times A cross B divided by A dot B cross C. Now, we can define a general translation vector in the reciprocal space, which is given by, say, Km as m1 times A plus m2 times B plus m3 times C, where m1, m2, m3 are all integers. And m3 are all integers. The advantage of defining this reciprocal lattice is the following. That is, you consider the following plane wave, for example, e to the power I km dot r, where r is a position vector and the plane wave is e to the power I km dot r, and you translate it by a direct lattice translation vector. Rn equal to n1 A plus n2 B plus n3 C. A, B, C, n1, n2, n3 are all integers, and A, B, C are the primitive vectors of the direct lattice. So, what you will see is that e to the power I km dot r plus Rn, which is obtained by translating the plane wave by Rn, this is equal to e to the power I km dot Rn into e to the power I km dot r, and what will, oh, by the way, I am interchangeably using r and r are the same. I should say that, because sometimes I use the r in this fashion, and some other times I use r in this fashion. So, I have to be so please bear with me for this confusion that I might have created. Now, what is km dot Rn? Km dot Rn is very easy to show. It is actually 2 pi times integer, and that integer r equal to 2 pi times, let me write down, m1 n1 plus m2 n2 plus m3 n3, because you have the orthogonality relationship between the direct lattice vectors and the reciprocal lattice vectors, which can be seen from the definition of the reciprocal lattice vectors. So, what it means is the following, that is, e to the power I km dot r plus Rn is equal to e to the power I 2 pi times an integer into e to the power I km dot r, and what you see is that e to the power 2 pi I times 2 pi times an integer is nothing but 1. Okay, so this will give me e to the power I km dot r. So that is to say that the plane waves with wave vector corresponding given by a reciprocal lattice vector, given by a reciprocal lattice translation vector, has the same periodicity as the lattice. So we know that any periodic function can be expanded in terms of a Fourier series, and here in this case a complex Fourier series. So what we can do is actually we can expand V of r as sigma over m Vm e to the I km dot r, where Vm is the Fourier coefficient given by integral e to the minus I km dot r times V of r d cubed r. So it's actually a 3-dimensional Fourier transform, or a Fourier expansion, not a Fourier transform, it's a Fourier expansion. So we can actually obtain an expression for the periodic potential V of r as sigma over m Vm e to the power I km dot r. So once you do that, then what we are left with is to solve the following Schrodinger equation, which is minus h cross squared by 2m del square plus sigma over m Vm e to the I km dot r times psi of r is equal to E psi of r. Okay. Because the potential is very weak, we can assume that psi r can be expanded in a basis of the plane waves. So we will try to do a perturbation theory, which is to assume that this is the crystal Hamiltonian. So we can define a unperturbed Hamiltonian H naught as equal to minus h cross squared by 2m del squared, so that the energies are given by psi naught k equal to h cross squared k squared by 2m, and the wave functions or the eigenstates, the energies are given by E of k, and the eigenstates are given by psi of k of r equal to e to the power I k dot r. So they are just plane waves where k can take values from minus infinity to infinity. Okay, so k can take those values, and this is the this thing unperturbed Hamiltonian. Now what you see is the following, that is E of k is degenerate, that is actually twofold degeneracy it has got. Corresponding to e to the corresponding to k and minus k. So if I give you two vectors k and minus k, which have, or rather in one dimension it will be k and minus k, but in general, so if modulus k is the same, is twofold degeneracy in one dimension, I must be very careful, it is not in general. So that is, as long as modulus k is constant, all k vectors on the sphere with same constant, that is with same or constant k, all have the same energy. So if you are looking at a one dimensional problem, the energy, it's a twofold degeneracy, that means E of plus k equal to E of minus k in one dimension, and in two dimensions all the k vectors whose tips lie on the circumference of a circle have the same energy. So you have more states which are degenerate, and it increases. This is something that we have actually seen earlier in some of the calculations that we did. Okay, so but this is important because even though the energies are degenerate, we can get away doing a non-degenerate perturbation theory. We can still do a non-degenerate perturbation theory, perturbation calculations for general k points. That is, for k not equal to k prime plus km, even when E of k equal to E of k prime. So even when the energies are degenerate of two particular states k and k prime, if the two states k and k prime are not related by a reciprocal lattice vector, then we can get away doing a non-degenerate perturbation calculation. The reason for this is the following. That is, supposing, let us consider the matrix element of the perturbation. The perturbation in our case is H1 is equal to sigma over Km Vm e to the I Km dot r. So if I am looking at any general this matrix element between two states k and k prime, what I have is k H1 k prime is equal to sigma over m Vm integral e to the I k prime plus km minus k dot r d cubed r. And this integrand that we are looking at, this integral is having an integrand. The integrand oscillates rapidly for k prime plus km minus k or let me put it this way. For k not equal to k prime plus km. Okay, so if this integral has to be non-zero, then the integrand should not oscillate so much, or in other words, what we have is the following. For the integral to be non-vanishing, what we need is k prime plus Km minus K should be equal to say 0. Okay, that means if K prime plus Km minus K is equal to 0, then then you know that it's going to give you just a normalization constant, or just 1 upon root V, where V is the volume of the crystal. So if this has to happen, what we require is that K prime plus Km should be equal to K, or also we can say that, or the scattering vector one second, let me be consistent. Or the scattering vector K prime minus K equal to delta K, the scattering vector should be equal to one of the reciprocal lattice vectors. So, and so if so, we know that the matrix element of the Hamiltonian is non-vanishing. So even if okay, let me just state it slightly differently. That is, the non-degenerate perturbation theory breaks down when E K prime plus Km is equal to E of K, since the eigenstates of H naught corresponding to the above energies give a non-zero matrix element for the perturbation. So this is the reason why you cannot do a degenerate perturbation theory when the energies of the two states are equal. Now the two K states are equal, and the two K states are related by a reciprocal lattice translation vector. So what we are actually meaning by that is K, let me see whether I use K prime plus K. So when we have K prime, one second, let me get the signs right. When we have modulus K primes, modulus K squared is equal to modulus K prime plus Km squared, then, and the two states K and K prime are degenerate, then we cannot use the perturbation theory. So actually it is, I should have been a bit more careful, and I should have just said it is K plus Km. Okay, K prime, let me put it, let me correct it a little bit. K prime, sorry, K prime, or in other words, K prime is equal to K minus Km. Okay, K prime. So that's what I'm writing it there. So let me see. So what it means is the following. That is, we must have we will have the following: k squared is equal to k prime squared plus 2 k prime dot km plus km squared, and since states k and k prime are degenerate, what we require is that 2k prime dot km plus km squared is equal to 0. Okay. So this is actually the condition for the Brillouin zone. This we had actually encountered earlier for the Brillouin zone boundary. So when two vectors k and k prime are related by a reciprocal lattice vector, then and they are also degenerate, then in that case we will have this condition. For example, in one dimension, what it means is the following. In one dimension, let me expand on that one so that any doubt can be clarified. In one dimension, it implies the following. K prime equal to k plus 2 pi by a is the lattice constant, or that is just k1 or k prime is equal to k plus k1. So if k is equal to minus pi by a, and then k prime, there is no vector sign because it is one dimensional, then k prime is equal to plus pi by a minus pi by a plus 2 pi by a equal to plus pi by a. So we have modulus k equal to modulus k prime, and k minus k prime is equal to k1, a reciprocal lattice vector. So we get that particular condition. So this is when we have the boundaries are at minus pi by a and pi by a in the one dimensional case. Having said that, now what we can do is, for general k points, we can carry out non-degenerate perturbation calculation. The energy in that case is given by Ek corresponding to second order perturbation theory is or the correct to the energy of the state k correct to second order in perturbation is nothing but h cross squared k squared by 2m plus V0. V0 corresponds to the following, that is V0 is equal to e to the I k dot r V of r e to the minus I k dot r plus sigma over all states which are given by km, okay, modulus Vm squared divided by Ek 0 minus Ek plus Km 0. So this is actually, you can show that this in fact nothing but, or I can also write E of k as h cross squared k squared by 2m plus v naught plus sigma over m Vm squared divided by k squared minus half k plus km squared, and this just follows from the second order perturbation expression, which says that the correction corresponding to the second order is of a state m is just given by sigma over n m psi m0 h1 psi n0 psi n0 h1 psi m0 divided by em0 minus en0, and h1 is a perturbation, so these two are complex conjugates of each other. Okay, so we have psi m0 h1 psi n0 will be modulus is equal to Vm, and the other one is nothing but the complex conjugate of this quantity, and so you get a modulus Vm square upon that. So this is what you will see for k values which are away from the zone edge, or for k values which are actually at the interior of the zone. And this is not very interesting. There is a constant shift of energy V0, and then there is some contribution which is coming from the states which are outside the Brillouin zone, reducing the energy of the states inside the Brillouin zone, because the denominator will always be negative in this case. So having said that, now let us go over to seeing what happens at the zone edges. I will start this in the next slot. So at this point I am going to close, and we will again continue this discussion later on. Thank you.